We know you guys love these stories, but most of you listening aren't subscribing. Our subs have been quite low this month, and we're really close to 20,000 subscribers, so please be a legend and smash the subscribe button. And like this video, it will really help support us. Thank you so much. Thank you. I never thought my first date with Greg would turn out like this. It was supposed to be a dream come true, finally going out with my high school crush. But sometimes reality doesn't match our expectations. I had a crush on Greg since freshman year. He was tall, athletic, and always seemed so confident. We shared a few classes together, and I'd admired him from afar for years. When he finally asked me out senior year, I was over the moon. We planned to meet at a local diner for dinner and then catch a movie. I spent hours getting ready, trying on different outfits, and doing my makeup just right. My stomach was full of butterflies as I drove to the diner. Greg was already there when I arrived. He looked great in a button-down shirt and jeans. I felt a flutter of excitement as I walked up to the table. But as soon as I sat down, things started to go downhill. The first red flag was how Greg barely looked up from his phone as I approached. He grunted a hello without making eye contact. I tried to start a conversation, asking how his day was going. Its responses were short and disinterested. When the waitress came to take our order, Greg was outright rude to her. He snapped at her for not bringing water fast enough and made a snarky comment about her appearance. I felt my face getting hot with embarrassment. This wasn't the Greg I thought I knew from school. Throughout the meal, Greg hardly spoke to me. He was constantly checking his phone and texting. The few times he did talk, it was mostly to complain about the food or make mean comments about other people in the restaurant. I tried my best to keep the conversation going, but it felt like talking to a brick wall. At one point, I excused myself to use the restroom. When I came back, I caught Greg openly staring at another girl across the room. He didn't even try to hide it when I sat back down. My heart sank as I realized this date was nothing like I had imagined. After dinner, we headed to the movie theater. I hoped things might improve, but Greg continued to be distant and rude. He insisted on seeing an action movie I had no interest in. During the film, he kept talking loudly and laughing at inappropriate moments, disturbing the other moviegoers. I wanted to sink into my seat and disappear. When the movie ended, I was more than ready for the night to be over. But Greg suggested we go for a drive. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I didn't want to give up on the date entirely, still clinging to some hope that the Greg I'd crushed on for years would emerge. As we drove around town, Greg's behavior got even worse. He started speeding and driving recklessly, ignoring my requests to slow down. He made crude jokes and insulted my friends when I mentioned them. At one point, he even tried to pressure me into going to a party I didn't want to attend. I finally worked up the courage to ask Greg to take me home. He seemed to know it but agreed. The drive back was tense and silent. As we neared my neighborhood, Greg suddenly turned onto a dark, unfamiliar road. My heart started racing. I asked where we were going, but Greg just smirked and said he wanted to show me something. We drove deeper into a wooded area, the trees casting eerie shadows in the headlights. I felt a growing sense of dread. Finally, Greg pulled over in a secluded spot. He turned off the engine and looked at me with a strange glint in his eye. I froze, unsure what to do. Greg leaned in, clearly expecting a kiss, but I turned away. He got angry, demanding to know why I was being such a tease. I fumbled for the door handle, my hands shaking. Greg grabbed my arm, trying to pull me back. In a panic, I shoved him away and managed to get out of the car. I started running down the dark road, my heart pounding in my ears. I could hear Greg yelling behind me, the car engine starting up. Terrified, I veered off the road into the woods. I stumbled through the underbrush, branches scratching my arms and face. I could hear the car driving slowly along the road, Greg calling out for me to come back. I kept moving, trying to put as much distance between us as possible. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, I couldn't hear the car anymore. I stopped to catch my breath, realizing I was completely lost in the dark woods. My phone had no signal, and I had no idea which direction to go. Tears streamed down my face as I tried to figure out what to do. Every rustle in the bushes made me jump, imagining Greg or some wild animal about to pounce. I picked a direction and started walking, hoping to find a road or house. The woods seemed to go on forever. My feet ached, my nice clothes were torn and dirty, and I was exhausted and scared. Just when I was about to give up hope, I saw lights in the distance. I hurried towards them, finally emerging from the woods onto a residential street. I knocked on the first door I saw, praying someone would answer. An elderly couple opened the door, looking concerned at my disheveled state. Through tears, I explained that I was lost and asked to use their phone. They kindly let me in and called my parents to come get me. As I waited for my parents to arrive, the couple made me tea and tried to comfort me. I was too shaken to give them many details, just saying I'd gotten separated from my date and lost in the woods. When my parents finally arrived, I broke down sobbing in their arms. The drive home was a blur of questions and explanations. I felt embarrassed, scared, and angry all at once. The next day at school was awful. Somehow, Greg had spread a rumor that I'd thrown myself at him and then run away when he rejected me. Some people believed him, giving me dirty looks in the hallways. Others who knew me better came to ask if I was okay, having heard about my accident in the woods. I avoided Greg as much as possible, but he seemed to go out of his way to cross my path, always with that same smirk on his face. It took weeks for the gossip to die down and for things to return to normal. My dream date had turned into a nightmare, but I was grateful to have escaped relatively unharmed. It would be a long time before I felt ready to go on another date, but I knew that when I did, I'd be much more careful about who I chose to spend time with. So a simple swipe right led to the most insane night of my life. There I was staring at my phone in disbelief as I matched with Lily, a stunning blonde whose profile pics looked like they belonged in a magazine. We hit it off instantly, our messages flying back and forth with witty banter and shared interests. After a week of non-stop texting, we decided to meet up for dinner at La Trattoria, a swanky Italian place downtown known for its romantic atmosphere and mouth-watering cuisine. As I pulled into the restaurant's parking lot, my palms were sweaty and my heart was racing. I'd been on plenty of first dates before, but something about Lily made me extra nervous. Maybe it was her model-like looks or the easy chemistry we had online. Whatever it was, I found myself double-checking my hair in the rearview mirror and popping a breath mint before heading inside. The hostess led me to a cozy corner table, and I settled in to wait for Lily. I fidgeted with my napkin, scrolling through our text conversations to calm my nerves. Just as I was starting to worry she might stand me up, the restaurant's door swung open, and there she was. Lily was even more breathtaking in person. Her long blonde hair cascaded over her shoulders, and she wore a form-fitting red dress that turned heads as she walked in. I stood up, probably a bit too eagerly, and waved her over. She flashed me a dazzling smile that made my knees weak. As we sat down, I couldn't help but feel like the luckiest guy in the world. Here I was on a date with this gorgeous woman who seemed genuinely interested in me. We made small talk as we perused the menus, and I found myself relaxing as our online rapport translated smoothly to real life. But then came the moment that would change everything. As the waiter approached to take our order, Lily's demeanor shifted. She sat up straighter, a glint in her eye that I couldn't quite read. "I'm absolutely famished," she announced, not even glancing at me. "I think I'll try everything." I chuckled, assuming she was joking. But as Lily began rattling off item after item from the menu, my laughter died in my throat. Appetizers, entrees, sides, desserts, she ordered it all. The waiter's eyebrows rose higher and higher as he scribbled furiously on his notepad. I sat there in stunned silence, my mind racing to calculate the astronomical bill we were racking up. When Lily finally finished ordering, she turned to me with a sweet smile, as if what had just happened was perfectly normal. "So, tell me more about your job," she said casually, as if she hadn't just ordered enough food to feed a small army. I stumbled through a response, my thoughts still reeling from the order frenzy. As we waited for the food to arrive, I tried to steer the conversation to lighter topics, hoping to recapture the easy banter we had online. But Lily seemed distracted, her eyes constantly darting around the restaurant and checking her phone. The appetizers started arriving in a steady stream, and I watched in a mix of horror and fascination as Lily dug in with gusto. She devoured plate after plate, barely coming up for air between bites. I picked at my food half-heartedly, my appetite gone as I worried about how I was going to pay for all this. As Lily polished off her second entree, a massive plate of veal parmesan, she finally looked up at me, her lipstick slightly smudged. "You know," she said matter-of-factly, "girls never pay on first dates. It's the man's job to treat us." My heart sank even further as I realized the full extent of the situation I was in. Excusing myself to the restroom, I splashed cold water on my face and tried to calm down. I did some quick mental math, estimating the bill to be well over $500, far more than I could afford. Panic set in as I realized I was trapped. Or was I? That's when the idea hit me. It wasn't right, and it certainly wasn't something I'd ever done before. But in that moment, faced with a bill I couldn't pay and a date who clearly didn't care, I made a split-second decision. I was going to run for it. Heart pounding, I peeked out of the restroom. Lily was still at our table, now working on our third dessert. The waitstaff was busy with other customers. This was my chance. I slipped out the side exit, half expecting someone to chase after me shouting about the unpaid bill. But I made it to my car without incident and peeled out of the parking lot, my hands shaking the steering wheel. As I drove home, adrenaline coursing through my veins, a mix of emotions washed over me. Guilt for ditching the bill, anger at Lily for putting me in that position, and disbelief at how the night had unfolded. I kept checking my rearview mirror, paranoid that someone from the restaurant might be following me. Once home, I immediately blocked Lily's number and unmatched her on the dating app. I paced my apartment, replaying the night's events in my head. What if she called the police? What if my face ended up on the local news as a dine and dasher? I even considered calling the restaurant to explain and offer to pay my share, but fear held me back. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed at the restaurant that night. Would Amanda have eventually ditched me with the bill? Or would we have both been caught in the act? I'll never know for sure, but one thing's certain. It's a first date I'll never forget. As for Amanda, last I heard she was serving time for her dine and dash spree. Part of me hopes she learned her lesson, but another part wonders if she's just planning her next big scam. All I know is if I ever see her face on a dating app again, I'll be swiping left faster than you can say, "Check, please." I was pretty excited about my first date with Peter. We'd been chatting online for a few weeks, and he seemed nice enough. When he suggested we go see the new horror movie, I thought it was a great idea. I've always loved scary films. We met outside the theater on Friday night. Peter was taller than his profile pic showed, with dark hair and a friendly smile. He bought our tickets and some popcorn to share, which I thought was sweet. The theater was pretty empty when we went in. We found seats near the back and got comfy as the lights dimmed. The movie started off creepy right away, with lots of jump scares that had me on edge. I kept grabbing handfuls of popcorn, munching nervously. About halfway through, I noticed Peter shifting closer to me. At first, I thought he was just getting more comfortable, but then I felt his arm brush against mine. I tensed up, unsure if it was on purpose or not. A few minutes later, he definitely put his arm around my shoulders. I froze, feeling really uncomfortable. This was way too fast for a first date. I tried to lean away a bit, but Peter just tightened his grip. My heart was racing, and not because of the movie anymore. Suddenly, Peter's other hand was on my thigh. I jerked away instinctively, knocking the popcorn to the floor. Peter looked annoyed and tried to pull me close again. That's when I knew I had to get out of there. I stood up abruptly, mumbling something about the bathroom. Peter seemed confused but didn't try to stop me. I bolted out of the theater, my legs shaky. Once in the lobby, I took some deep breaths to calm down. Part of me wanted to just leave, but I was worried Peter might follow me. I spotted a security guard and approached him, explaining what happened. He was understanding and called the police right away. While we waited, the guard went to confront Peter. I was so relieved when I saw Peter being escorted out. He looked angry and kept glancing my way, which made me feel sick to my stomach. The police arrived pretty quickly. I gave them a statement about what happened, my voice shaky as I recounted the details. They were kind and reassuring, telling me I did the right thing by reporting it. After everything was sorted out, one of the officers offered to walk me to my car. I gratefully accepted, still feeling on edge. As we walked through the parking lot, I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder. Once safely in my car, I just sat there for a few minutes, processing what happened. I felt a mix of anger, fear, and disappointment. What was supposed to be a fun night out turned into such a scary experience. On the drive home, I kept replaying everything in my mind. Had I missed some red flags when we were chatting online? Should I have been more cautious about meeting a stranger? I tried to remind myself that it wasn't my fault. Peter was the one who crossed the line. When I got home, I immediately called my best friend to tell her what happened. Talking it through helped me feel a bit better. She was super supportive and offered to come over, but I just wanted to be alone. I took a long hot shower trying to wash away the icky feeling. Afterwards, I made some tea and curled up on the couch with my cat. The familiar comfort of home helped calm my nerves a bit. That night, I had trouble falling asleep. Every little noise made me jump. I kept imagining Peter showing up at my door, even though he didn't know where I lived. I eventually drifted off, but my dreams were full of shadowy figures chasing me. The next morning, I woke up feeling drained. The events of the night before came flooding back, and I felt a knot in my stomach. I called in sick to work, not ready to face people yet. As I scrolled through my phone, I saw that Peter had sent me several angry messages overnight. I quickly blocked his number and deleted our chat history. Seeing his name pop up made me feel panicky all over again. Throughout the day, I went back and forth between feeling scared and feeling angry. Why did Peter think it was okay to touch me like that? Didn't he understand the concept of consent? I was glad I reported him, hoping it might prevent him from doing the same to someone else. My friend came over that evening with ice cream and movies. We avoided anything scary, sticking to lighthearted comedies instead. It felt good to laugh and take my mind off things for a while. The next few days were a blur. I stayed home mostly, not feeling up to going out. I kept checking my windows and doors, making sure they were locked. Every time my phone buzzed, I'd jump, worried it might be Peter somehow. By Monday, I knew I had to get back to normal life. I went to work trying to act like everything was fine. I felt on edge all day, constantly looking over my shoulder. My coworkers noticed something was off, but I brushed off their concerns. That evening, I decided to go for a walk to clear my head. As I turned a corner, I saw a guy who looked like Peter coming towards me. My heart started racing, and I quickly crossed the street. It turned out to be someone else, but it took a while for my pulse to slow down. Over the next week, I slowly started to feel more like myself again. I was still wary about the idea of dating, but I refused to let one bad experience ruin it for me completely. I knew not all guys were like Peter. I decided to delete my online dating profile for a while. The thought of chatting with strangers just didn't appeal to me anymore. Instead, I focused on spending time with friends and family, surrounding myself with people I trusted. One day, while out shopping with a friend, I saw a poster for the movie Peter and I had gone to see. It brought back a flood of memories, and I felt my chest tighten. My friend noticed and asked what was wrong. I ended up telling her the whole story. As the weeks went by, I started to feel stronger. I still had moments of fear or anxiety, especially when I was out alone at night, but I was learning to manage those feelings better. I even started to consider the idea of dating again, though the thought still made me nervous. It could have been so much worse if I hadn't acted quickly. I learned some valuable lessons about setting boundaries and prioritizing my safety. I'd never thought a first date could turn into such a nightmare. It all started when I matched with Sami on a dating app. Her profile showed a fit, attractive girl with long brown hair and a bright smile. We hit it off right away, bonding over our shared love of Korean food and hiking. For weeks, we texted back and forth. Sami was funny, smart, and seemed to have a lot in common with me. I was excited to finally meet her in person. We agreed to have dinner at a Korean BBQ place downtown on Friday night. As the day approached, I felt a mix of nerves and anticipation. I spent extra time getting ready, wanting to make a good impression. I'd arrived at the restaurant a few minutes early and waited near the entrance, scanning the faces of people walking in. That's when things started to go wrong. I spotted someone waving at me from a corner booth. As it got closer, my heart sank. The woman sitting there looked nothing like Sami's pictures. She was much heavier, with greasy hair and stained clothes. I tried not to stare as I approached, wondering if there had been some mistake. But no, this was definitely Sami. She grinned up at me, bits of food stuck in her teeth. The smell hit me as I got closer, a mix of body odor and something sour I couldn't identify. I felt my stomach turn. I stood there frozen, unsure what to do. Part of me wanted to turn and run, but I didn't want to be rude. So I awkwardly slid into the booth across from her, trying to breathe through my mouth. Sami launched into conversation, talking with her mouth full of banchan. I nodded along, still in shock. How could the person I'd been talking to for weeks be so different in real life? I felt angry and betrayed. As Sami rambled on, I tried to process what was happening. Her voice was different from what I'd imagined, deeper and raspier. She kept reaching across the table to touch my arm, her fingers leaving greasy smears on my sleeve. The waiter came to take our order, and Sami ordered enough food for 4 people. She winked at me and said she had a big appetite. I just nodded, feeling more uncomfortable by the minute. While we waited for the food, Sami started asking personal questions. She wanted to know where I lived, worked, and spent my free time. It felt invasive, especially given the circumstances. I gave vague answers, not wanting to share too much. The food arrived, and Semi dug in with gusto. She barely came up for air, shoveling meat and rice into her mouth. Grease dribbled down her chin. I picked at my food, having lost my appetite entirely. After a few minutes, I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up abruptly and told Sammy I had to leave. Her face darkened as I turned to go. That's when things got really scary. Sammy lunged out of the booth, moving surprisingly fast for her size. She grabbed my arm, her grip painfully tight. I tried to pull away, but she held on, saying she wasn't letting me leave. My heart raced as I realized how much stronger she was than me. Then Sammy threatened to wrestle me to the ground if I tried to go. I froze, picturing her enormous body pinning me down. Other diners were starting to stare. I felt trapped and panicked, unsure how to escape this situation. I tried to reason with Sammy, telling her to let go, but she just tightened her grip, her eyes wild. She started pulling me back towards the booth, saying we needed to finish our date. In desperation, I yelled for help. A couple at a nearby table stood up, looking concerned. Sammy glanced their way, momentarily distracted. I seized the opportunity and wrenched my arm free. I bolted for the door, not looking back. I could hear Sammy yelling after me, her heavy footsteps following. Adrenaline surged through me as I ran out into the street. I sprinted down the block, weaving through pedestrians. I could still hear Sammy behind me, huffing and puffing. I ducked into an alley, hoping to lose her. My heart pounded as I crouched behind a dumpster. I heard Sammy's labored breathing as she lumbered past the alley entrance. I held my breath, praying she wouldn't spot me. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, I peeked out. The street was empty. Sammy was gone. I sagged with relief, my legs shaking. I waited a few more minutes to be sure, then stumbled out of the alley. My mind was reeling, trying to process what had just happened. How had a simple date turned into such a nightmare? I walked quickly, constantly looking over my shoulder. Every large person I saw made me jump. I ducked into a convenience store and bought a baseball cap, pulling it low over my face. When I felt I was far enough away, I called an Uber. As I waited, I blocked Sammy's number and deleted the dating app. I never wanted to experience anything like that again. The ride home was a blur. I kept replaying the evening in my mind, wondering how I could have been so wrong about someone. There had been red flags, Sammy's reluctance to video chat, her vague answers about her job, but I'd ignored them. At home, I double-checked all my locks. I felt jumpy and on edge, imagining Sammy somehow tracking me down. I barely slept that night, startling at every sound. The next day, I considered reporting the incident to the police, but I wasn't sure what I could say. Technically, Sammy hadn't done anything illegal. It was my word against hers. I never imagined a simple hot pot date could turn into such a nightmare. It all started when I matched with Sarah on a dating app. We hit it off right away, chatting about our shared love for spicy food and travel. After a week of texting, we decided to meet up for dinner at a popular hot pot place downtown. I arrived at the restaurant early, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. The place was buzzing with activity, steam rising from tables where groups of friends huddled around bubbling pots. I chose a cozy cornered booth and waited, fidgeting with my phone. When Sarah walked in, my jaw nearly dropped. She looked even prettier than her profile pictures, with long dark hair and a warm smile that instantly put me at ease. We sat down and started poring over the menu, debating which broth to choose and what ingredients to add. As we waited for our food to cook, conversation flowed easily. Sarah told me about her job as a graphic designer and her dreams of starting her own business someday. I shared stories from my recent backpacking trip through Southeast Asia. The evening was going great, and I felt like we had a real connection. We were about halfway through our meal, laughing over a story about my disastrous attempt at making homemade kimchi, when things took a sudden turn. A tall, muscular guy stormed up to our table, his face red with anger. At first, I thought he might be an angry ex-boyfriend or something, but then he started yelling at Sarah, calling her his wife. My stomach dropped as I realized what was happening. Sarah had never mentioned being married. In fact, she had told me she was single and even talked about wanting to find a long-term relationship. I felt like such an idiot for not seeing any warning signs. The husband, who I later learned was named Mike, turned his rage towards me. He got right in my face, jabbing his finger at my chest and threatening to teach me a lesson for messing with his wife. I tried to stay calm, holding my hands up and explaining that I had no idea Sarah was married. Sarah just sat there, looking mortified and close to tears. She didn't deny anything her husband was saying. The other diners were all staring at us, some even pulling out their phones to record the drama unfolding. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, adrenaline surging through my body as I tried to figure out how to defuse the situation. I kept trying to reason with Mike, telling him over and over that this was all a huge misunderstanding. I even offered to show him our chat history on the dating app as proof that Sarah had presented herself as single. This seemed to make him even angrier, but now his fury was directed more at Sarah than at me. The restaurant manager rushed over, asking us to leave. He looked nervous, probably worried about the scene disrupting other customers or escalating into something physical. As we all walked outside, I was terrified that Mike might try to get violent. My eyes darted around, looking for potential escape routes or witnesses in case things got ugly. Once outside in the chilly night air, Mike grabbed Sarah's arm and started leading her away. She looked back at me with a mix of shame and apology in her eyes. I stood there frozen, unsure what to do. Part of me wanted to make sure Sarah was safe, but I was also scared of provoking Mike further. Just as I was about to turn and walk away, Mike spun around and charged at me. I barely had time to react before his fist connected with my jaw, sending me stumbling backward. Pain exploded through my face as I struggled to keep my balance. Sarah screamed, begging Mike to stop. I raised my hands, trying to show it wasn't a threat, but Mike was beyond reason. He swung at me again, this time catching me in the stomach. I doubled over, gasping for air. Just then, two guys who had been eating at the restaurant came running out. They must have seen what was happening and decided to intervene. They grabbed Mike, pulling him away from me. He struggled against them, still yelling threats and insults. Someone had called the police, and I could hear sirens in the distance. Mike seemed to realize he was in trouble and suddenly bolted, shoving past the guys holding him and disappearing down a side street. Sarah stood there for a moment, looking torn before running after him. I slumped against the wall of the restaurant, my head spinning. One of the guys who had helped me asked if I was okay and if I needed an ambulance. I shook my head, even though my jaw was throbbing and I could taste blood in my mouth. The police arrived a few minutes later, but Mike and Sarah were long gone. I gave a statement explaining what had happened. The officers took down Mike's description and said they'd look for him, but I didn't have much hope they'd find him. I spent the next few hours at the hospital getting checked out. Luckily, nothing was broken, but I had a nasty bruise on my jaw and some sore ribs. The doctors advised me to press charges if the police found Mike, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to drag this out any longer. Over the next few days, I jumped every time my phone buzzed, half expecting to see a message from Sarah explaining or apologizing. But there was nothing. I kept replaying the night in my head, wondering if I had missed any red flags. I also worried that Mike might try to find me and confront me again. I ended up blocking Sarah's number and deleting my dating app profile, too shaken to even think about dating for a while. It took me some time to feel comfortable going out again, especially to that part of town. Every time I saw a couple arguing in public, I felt a twinge of panic. The bruises faded and the fear of Mike showing up at my door subsided, but the experience left its mark. I became much more cautious about meeting people online, always insisting on video chats and doing some social media digging before agreeing to meet in person. I still enjoy hotbot, but I can't eat it without thinking about that disastrous date. Sometimes I wonder what happened to Sarah and Mike after that night. Did they work things out? Did Sarah face consequences for her deception? I'll probably never know, and part of me is okay with that. I never thought a simple Snapchat message would lead to such a terrifying experience. It all started on a Tuesday afternoon when I got a notification from someone named Desmond. His profile seemed normal enough. Just a guy in his mid-20s with a friendly smile and some photos of him hiking and hanging out with friends. We started chatting casually about our interests and daily lives. Desmond seemed funny and easygoing, and we had a lot in common. We both loved video games, hiking, and trying new restaurants. After a few days of messaging back and forth, he suggested we meet up for a date at the local arcade. I was hesitant at first. Meeting someone from the internet always felt a bit risky, but my friends encouraged me to go for it. They said it would be fun and that the arcade was a safe public place. Plus, I'd been feeling a bit lonely lately and thought it might be nice to meet someone new. So I agreed to meet Desmond there on Friday night. As Friday approached, I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. I spent way too long deciding what to wear, finally settling on a casual outfit of jeans and a cute top. I didn't want to seem like I was trying too hard, but I also wanted to look nice. When I arrived at the arcade, I spotted Desmond easily. He looked just like his profile pictures, which was a relief. He was wearing a blue t-shirt and jeans, and he waved when he saw me. We greeted each other, and at first, everything seemed fine. He suggested we start with some racing games, and I agreed. We played a few rounds of Mario Kart, laughing and trash-talking each other. I was actually having a good time, and I started to think that maybe this wasn't such a bad idea after all. After racing, we moved on to some shooter games. That's when I began to notice some red flags. Desmond was getting increasingly competitive with the games. At first, I thought it was just playful banter, but his reactions when he lost were a bit over the top. He'd mutter under his breath and glare at the machines. Once, he even kicked the base of the game we were playing. I tried to brush it off, thinking he was just really into gaming, but it made me uncomfortable. We moved on to skee-ball, and I tried to lighten the mood by joking around. But Desmond seemed fixated on getting the highest score. He barely responded to my attempts at conversation, instead focusing intensely on the game. When a little kid accidentally bumped into him, causing him to miss a throw, Desmond snapped at the child. I was shocked and quickly apologized to the kid and his mom. After about an hour, I was starting to feel uneasy. Desmond suggested we leave the arcade and go for a walk in the nearby park. I wasn't comfortable with that idea, so I politely declined and said I should probably head home soon. That's when things took a turn for the worse. Desmond's whole demeanor changed in an instant. His face hardened, and he started insisting that I come back to his place. He said he had a great collection of video games we could play, and that it would be more fun than the arcade. I firmly said no, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. He kept pushing, saying we were having such a good time, and that he just wanted to hang out more. I started to feel really scared and decided it was time to leave. As I turned to go, Desmond grabbed my arm. I pulled away, telling him to stop, but he just got angrier. Suddenly, he lashed out and punched the wall next to us. The sound echoed through the arcade, and several people turned to look at us. I was frozen in place for a moment, shocked by his sudden violence. That's when I realized I needed to get out of there fast. I quickly pulled out my phone and called for a cab, keeping my distance from Desmond. He was pacing back and forth, muttering to himself and occasionally hitting the wall again. I was terrified he might turn that anger on me at any moment. The wait for the cab felt like an eternity. I kept my eyes on Desmond, ready to run if he made any moves toward me. Other people in the arcade had started to notice what was happening, and a few of them moved closer, which made me feel a little safer. That employee came over and asked if everything was okay. I nodded, not wanting to escalate the situation, but I think she could tell something was wrong. When the cab finally arrived, I practically ran to it. As I got in, I could see Desmond watching me from the arcade entrance. His expression was a mix of anger and something else I couldn't quite place. It sent chills down my spine. I asked the cab driver to take me home and kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Desmond following us. The ride home was tense. I couldn't stop shaking and my mind was racing. I kept replaying the events of the night, trying to figure out how things had gone so wrong so quickly. When we finally pulled up to my house, I thanked the driver and rushed inside, locking all the doors and windows behind me. Once inside, I broke down crying. The stress and fear of the situation hit me all at once. I called my best friend and told her what had happened. She offered to come over, but I just wanted to be alone. I spent the rest of the night curled up on my couch, jumping at every little noise outside. The next morning, I woke up to several messages from Desmond. At first, they were apologetic. He said he was sorry for how he acted and that he had a bad day. But as I scrolled through, the messages became more aggressive. He accused me of leading him on and ruining the night. The last message was particularly chilling. He said he knew where I lived and that we should finish our date. Panicked, I immediately blocked him on all platforms and reported his account on Snapchat. I also called the police to report his threat. They took my statement and said they'd keep an eye on the area, but there wasn't much else they could do at that point. I was constantly on edge. I changed my routines, varied the times I left for work, and asked friends to check in on me regularly. I couldn't shake the image of Desmond's angry face or the sound of his fist hitting the wall. Every time I saw a blue t-shirt or a car that looked like the one he drove, my heart would race. It took a long time before I felt safe going out alone again. I installed extra locks on my doors and a security camera at my front door. I also started taking self-defense classes, hoping they would help me feel more secure. Desmond's competitiveness, his overreactions to losing, and his attempt to change our plans without my agreement were all warning signs. I never thought a simple dating app match would lead to the scariest night of my life. I've been chatting with Max for a few weeks, and he seemed nice. Funny, charming, with a good job and similar interests to mine. When he suggested meeting up for dinner, I was excited. We'd agreed to meet at a new Italian place downtown. I arrived a few minutes early, feeling those typical first date butterflies. When Max pulled up in his car, my first impression was good. He was tall and handsome, just like his photos, with a warm smile that put me at ease. Inside the restaurant, we ordered drinks and appetizers. Max was attentive, asking lots of questions about my job and hobbies. He had a way of making me feel like the most interesting person in the room. But as the night went on, I started noticing little things that seemed off. Max kept glancing around the restaurant nervously, like he was worried about being watched. When he talked about his past, his stories didn't quite add up. He mentioned living in a city during one anecdote and claimed he'd never been there in another. Small inconsistencies that made me wonder if he was lying. I tried to brush off my unease, telling myself I was being paranoid. But the feeling persisted. There was something about the way Max looked at me. His gaze was too intense, almost predatory. It sent chills down my spine. After dinner, Max suggested we go for a walk. It was getting dark out, and I didn't really want to. I felt pressured to agree. As we strolled down the quiet streets, Max's demeanor changed. He became more aggressive, walking too close and trying to steer me down dark alleys. My heart was racing. I made an excuse about needing to use the restroom and ducked into a convenience store, hoping to lose him. But when I came out, Max was waiting. He grabbed my arm roughly and insisted on walking me to my car. I was shaking with fear at this point. That's when I saw it, a glint of metal in Max's pocket that looked suspiciously like a knife. In that moment, all my worst fears were confirmed. This man was dangerous. I knew I had to get away fast. Luckily, I spotted a police officer up ahead. Without thinking, I wrenched my arm free and ran towards the officer, yelling for help. When I turned back, Max had vanished into the night. The police officer was alarmed by my panicked state. He called for backup and took my statement right there on the street. I was still trembling as I described Max and everything that had happened. The officer assured me they would investigate and offered to escort me home. Back in my apartment, I double-checked all locks and curled up on the couch, too scared to sleep. I kept replaying the night in my mind, wondering how I'd missed the warning signs. The next morning, I got a call from the police station asking me to come in. At the station, a detective showed me a series of photos. My blood ran cold as I recognized Max in several of them. The detective explained that Max was a suspected serial killer who had been targeting women in the area. He'd been using dating apps to find his victims. I learned that 3 women had gone missing after going on dates with someone matching Max's description. The police had been trying to track him down for months, but he always seemed to stay one step ahead. My report was the closest they'd come to catching him. The detective asked me to go through every detail of my date again, hoping for any clues that might help them find Max. I described his car, his clothes, the way he talked. Every little thing I could remember. They took PMA samples from my clothes where Max had grabbed me, hoping for a match. For weeks after, I lived in fear. I kept expecting to see Max's face in every crowd, to find him waiting outside my apartment. I couldn't sleep without checking that all my windows were locked. Every time my phone buzzed with a notification, my heart would race thinking it might be him. The police kept me updated on their investigation. They found Max's abandoned car a few days after our date, but there was no trace of him. His apartment had been cleaned out. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. As time passed, my fear slowly turned to anger. I was angry at Max for terrorizing me and other women. Angry at myself for not trusting my instincts sooner. Angry at a world where women have to constantly be on guard. I decided to channel that anger into action. I started volunteering with a local women's safety organization, sharing my story and helping educate others about the dangers of online dating. It felt good to turn my terrifying experience into something positive. Months went by with no sign of Max. The case went cold, but I knew he was still out there somewhere. Every time I heard about a missing woman on the news, I wondered if it was his doing. Almost a year after my date with Max, I got another call from the detective. They'd finally caught him. Max had been arrested in another state, trying to lure another woman into his car. When they searched his new apartment, they found evidence linking him to multiple murders. I felt a mix of relief and renewed fear. Relief that he was off the streets and couldn't hurt anyone else, but fear knowing how close I'd come to being one of his victims. The detective asked if I'd be willing to testify if the case went to trial. Without hesitation, I said yes. Preparing for the trial was hard. I had to relive that night over and over, going through every detail with the prosecutors. But I was determined to do whatever it took to keep Max behind bars. When the day of the trial came, I was terrified of seeing Max again. But as I took the stand and saw him sitting there, all I felt was anger. I told my story clearly and firmly, looking him in the eye the whole time. I refused to let him intimidate me anymore. The trial lasted for weeks. I sat through horrifying testimony about Max's other victims, feeling sick to my stomach. When the jury finally returned a guilty verdict, I broke down in tears of relief. Max was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As they led him out of the courtroom, he looked at me one last time. I stared back, silently daring him to try and scare me. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I'd been chatting with Jake online for weeks, and I was super excited about our first date. He seemed perfect, funny, smart, and into all the same nerdy stuff as me. When he suggested meeting up for dinner, I couldn't wait. We agreed to meet at this trendy new restaurant downtown. I spent hours getting ready, trying on practically every outfit I owned. I wanted to look just right. As I walked up to the restaurant, I saw Jake waiting outside. He looked even better in person, tall, with messy brown hair and bright green eyes. Jake greeted me with a quick hug, then held the door open as we went inside. The hostess led us to a cozy booth near the back. As we looked over the menus, Jake started telling me about his day at work. He was a graphic designer and had just landed a big new client. I was impressed and found myself hanging on his every word. When the waiter came to take our order, Jake suggested we split an appetizer. I thought that was sweet. He wanted to share. We both ordered entrees and continued chatting while we waited for the food. Jake kept the conversation flowing easily, asking me questions about my job and hobbies. The appetizer arrived and we dug in. I noticed Jake ate most of it, barely leaving me a few bites. I tried not to read too much into it. Maybe he was just really hungry. Our main courses came soon after. The food was delicious and I was having a great time getting to know Jake better. As we finished eating, I noticed Jake glancing at his watch. He mentioned needing to get home soon to let his dog out. I was a little disappointed the date was ending already, but I understood. When the check came, Jake just sat there looking at it. After an awkward silence, he mumbled something about forgetting his wallet at home. My heart sank as I realized he expected me to pay. Not wanting to make a scene, I reluctantly pulled out my credit card. Jake barely even thanked me as the waiter took the check. As we walked out of the restaurant, Jake asked if I could give him a ride home. His car was in the shop, he claimed. I agreed, even though it was out of my way. We climbed in my car and Jake directed me to his apartment across town. As we drove, he kept fiddling with the radio and complaining about the songs. When we were about halfway there, Jake suddenly asked if we could stop for gas. His tone made it clear he expected me to pay for that too. I was getting more uncomfortable by the minute, but didn't want to start an argument. We pulled into a gas station and Jake hopped out to fill up the tank. When he came back to the car, he held out his hand expectantly. With a sigh, I handed over my credit card again. Back on the road, Jake's demeanor changed. He barely spoke and kept checking his phone. When we finally reached his apartment building, I was relieved the night was almost over. But as Jake got out of the car, he leaned back in and asked to borrow $20 for groceries. I was shocked at his nerve, but something in his expression made me nervous about saying no. I reluctantly dug a $20 bill out of my wallet and handed it over. Jake took the money without a word of thanks and headed into his building. I sat there for a moment trying to process what had just happened. The whole night felt surreal. As I drove home, I tried to convince myself I was overreacting. Maybe Jake was just having a bad day or was nervous on our first date. The next morning, I woke up still feeling uneasy about the whole situation. I decided to text Jake and see if he wanted to grab coffee later in the week. To my dismay, the message wouldn't go through. When I checked Jake's profile on the dating app, I discovered he had unmatched and blocked me. Reality came crashing down as I realized I'd been scammed. Jake had never been interested in dating me. He just wanted a free meal and some cash. I felt like such an idiot for falling for his act. The whole night replayed in my head, and I saw all the red flags I'd ignored. I spent the next few days in a daze replaying every moment of the day in my mind. How could I have been so blind? I thought about all the time we'd spent chatting online before meeting. Had it all been a lie? I felt sick thinking about how much effort Jake had put into tricking me. I couldn't bring myself to tell my friends what had happened. I was too embarrassed and ashamed. Every time my phone buzzed with a text, I hoped it might be Jake apologizing and explaining it was all a misunderstanding. But of course, it never was. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.